Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to part 41 of my Hyperion progression series. In today's video, I have one focus only, and that focus is Black Mage. For those who don't know, a lot of the reason why I have been pushing for Black Mage in the recent weeks is because we have been announced in the next update, in the Go West update, that there will be a pretty significant FD decrease. In other words, after the update drops, we will all be taking a slight penalty in our damage. On top of that, we will also be losing the event buffs from Maple Island, meaning that I will lose out on my boss damage, my IED, and also, most importantly, the Arcane Force bonus that is required for Black Mage. All of these things need to be lined up for me to be able to clear Black Mage, so I am on a timer to clear it before the 12th. Following on from the previous video, I made some significant gains when it came to my gear. So let's just quickly go through my gear and see where we are. I have most of my items at 21, with 3-line wherever possible, with a weapon jump 3 as my special ring. My arcane weapon is sitting at 17, and my other arcanes are all sitting at 19. My gloves have 2 lines of crit damage, which is a significant gain that I got during the last event. On top of this, I also have a 19-star Eyepatch, and I have used a black heart from Hard Lotus. This puts me at 110 mil combat power with everything equipped, and this is what I'm going to be using to go for my clear for Black Mage. From this point onwards, I will be commentating over what I will be doing in my run, and if you guys are interested in the full run, I'll have it linked in the description below. To start off, the first thing that I did was actually go into practice mode with most of my buffs on. The reason why I did this was to see if I could actually do a 1 burst consistently in first phase of Black Mage. For those who don't know what's going on here, both of these statues, the black and white ones, both share a HP bar. And this phase is quite annoying because there are a lot of ways for you to lose lives really fast, and you really want to try to get out of this phase as soon as possible. I opted to go with the blink strategy. I know that there were a few different ways to try to get these statues to stack, but for me, it was more consistent for me to use the blink strategy. On completion of my burst, I managed to do about 60% of the damage, which I was pretty happy with, and just judging by this, I was confident that I would be able to get out of P1 pretty quickly in my real run. I am missing quite a few buffs on entry here, so just doing this practice run gave me a really good indication of how much damage I needed to do. I eventually managed to get out of this practice mode with all of my lives intact, which gave me a lot of confidence that maybe my next run I'll be able to go in with everything and try to get out of P1 with hopefully more than 10 lives. The reason I am running in practice mode first is, for 1, I wanted to see the damage in phase 1, and also 2, I wanted to get a little bit of practice in phase 2. Just to get it as a warm up, so then when I do go into phase 2, I'll be able to be a little less jittery and be a little bit more familiar with my TP. So let's just talk about these two things real quick. For the guild skills, I have to wait for them to tick over to about 10 or so minutes remaining before I go into my real run. And the reason for this is because I don't actually have the full damage to clear the entirety of Black Mage with one set of G skills. I need the damage to clear the first phase of Black Mage, and then I need to use the guild skills again later in the fight to be able to clear out of phase 4. I'll talk a little bit about phase 4 later, but all you have to know about that phase is that HP bar basically regenerates really quickly, so I definitely need the guild skills for that phase. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the teleport boost. That's just something that a lot of mages have, where you can adjust the size of your teleport, allowing you to have a longer range teleport. And there are some situations within the fight where having an extended boost on the teleport range does help you avoid various mechanics. For me though, I have been playing without teleport boost in bossing for a very long time, so I have the muscle memory of a shorter teleport. And over the last couple of weeks actually, I've been trying to learn to play with it on, so I can have a better time in both phase 2 and phase 3 for Black Mage. So in this run, it was also a little bit of just getting used to the teleport range. Once my guild skills were ticking a bit lower and I had all my cooldowns basically back up, it was time to go set up our buffs. The first buff that I went to get was the one from Princess No, and all you have to do is to jump around on the top left platform after going to the final stage. This will give me a 40 attack buff, which is a pretty significant amount of damage. Next up, I went to grab a Wild Hunter buff. This is a buff that is a little bit questionable, but I think because it's so accessible, I decided to allow myself to actually gain access to this buff, and they'll be able to buff you with a good amount of extra attack. Next up, of course, is to get the Fame buff. simply by faming somebody on a 275 chair. And then the last external buff that I wanted to grab was my house buff. It isn't leveled up very far, but it is better than nothing, and it will give us some amount of boss damage. With that all done, it was time to pop the remainder of my buffs, including all of my 30s, my 1 hour buffs, and so on. Making sure to also make use out of our Meister Smithing buff, which we got recently, and it was time for us to run the real run. To start off, much like our practice run, I opted to go for the blink strat to stack the 2 statues, and with this I managed to get a pretty clean setup on my burst. As I was buffing up my Angelic Buster link and also my weapon jump, I managed to proc a Fatal Strike on time, and I get a Fatal Strike Origin, which gives us an insane amount of extra damage. From here I decided to try to use my Party Shield to cheese the mechanics for the boss, but I accidentally get knocked out of it and then immediately take 2 lives. A really rough start, but I realized that these 2 were actually staying still stacked and my burst was still up. So rather than being too fussed about losing my 2 lives immediately, I decided to take advantage of them staying stacked on top of each other and just went for a lot of extra damage. And you can see here, within 1 burst I almost did the entirety of the HP bar. I also noticed that black was being separate from white, and this allowed me to get a lot of extra damage in on this statue as well. With the way that I got lucky with them separating, I actually managed to get into P2 without even needing to use my mini burst. Inside of P2, it is definitely one of the phases that I felt most comfortable in. I spent a lot of time practicing in P2 to be able to get into P3, and a lot of the practices I didn't have my guild skills, so I did actually spend quite a lot of time just being in this phase, trying to get used to it and making sure that I do not lose any lives. It's really important for me to get out of P2 with as many lives as possible, because 1, it is a relatively safe phase compared to the rest of the fight, and definitely because in phase 3 it can get very volatile and a lot of mechanics can happen that takes a lot of your lives. For this boss, I definitely put a priority on trying to stay alive as best I could in phase 2. Another thing that I was trying my best to do throughout the fight, especially in phase 2, was to keep having a black curse on my head. What this allows me to do is gain a lot of extra damage in the fight at the cost of a little bit of HP. In phase 2 it is very easy to control whether or not you have a black curse, just by simply taking a single chain of damage and then getting the curse and then avoiding the rest. That way I can have the benefit of the black curse, but also trying my best to avoid as many mechanics as possible. Throughout the entirety of P2 I felt pretty comfortable outputting damage, and even during my burst I was still focused, and it went really well for the first half of P2. There were a lot of situations that I played into when I was practicing that I didn't expect to get my character into, and I can really feel the difference of the practice that I did in this real run. It felt like a lot of the patterns in phase 2 were very predictable, and for the most part I could tell which is the play that I needed to do to stay alive. Things were going quite well up until the end of the second phase, where I accidentally died to a bunch of chains. What I could have done here was simply to press E form, but I really didn't expect to be hit by so many chains in the corner, especially during the FMA. Overall though, this entire phase goes pretty well, and only losing 1 life in P2 is still pretty okay. I make it into phase 3 with about 48 minutes remaining, and better yet, I have my origin burst going into phase 3. Entering into P3 with 9 lives remaining is a pretty strong feeling. I felt very confident going into here, but I also had a lot of nervousness going in, mostly because I had never had such a successful P1 and P2 combined to have 9 lives in P3. With that in mind though, I didn't have that much practice in phase 3. I only had a general gist of what I needed to do, and I've only had maybe at tops of half an hour practice inside P3 in total. I had 2 focuses in mind in phase 3. The first one is trying my best to avoid the kicks as often as possible, and secondly trying my best to maximize my burst. Because I didn't really know what to expect from my damage, and I never really made it past 70% in phase 3, at this point I was still pretty nervous about my damage. Unfortunately, towards the beginning of phase 3 however, I did actually take a HP death. I was trying to avoid the rollings on the floor, which coincided with the orbs falling from the ceiling, and I got very lucky that it was only a HP death and not both a HP and curse death. While setting up my second burst, I was unfortunate enough to get caught by a bunch of the super lasers. These lasers do about half of your HP for each instance, and you can see here I tried to dodge a bunch of them and I ended up getting clipped by a few of them. A bit of an unfortunate death, but I managed to stay focused and still pull off a pretty clean burst afterwards. The fight goes pretty well for a little bit afterwards, but after one of the FMAs, I got hit by one of the flying angels during the FMA, and as I was coming towards back into the boss, I get hit by the exploding platform on the floor. At about 40 minutes in, I have my origin burst back up. In this burst, I finally managed to push Black Mage into the first shrink. This marks about 30% of the way through the fight in phase 3, but it only gets more difficult from here. I've already lost 3 lives in P3, and with only 6 remaining, this fight is getting really tight. Not too long after my burst finishes, we had a up FMA that I had to play, and as I was avoiding a bunch of the mechanics on the floor, I didn't realize that while landing I was going to end up on an exploding platform. And that exploding platform takes another life because I had taken a black curse from an earlier mechanic. This leaves me with only 5 lives to play with, and I still have 40 minutes left in the boss to go. At this point I was starting to get really nervous because I had never gotten this far in P3 in itself, and I also have never actually went into phase 4 on my battle mage. I could definitely feel the anxiety at this point building up for me, but with 40 minutes left to go, I really had to stay focused. While setting up this burst, I decided to teleport through the rollings. You can see this is where the teleport boost practice really paid off, and being just comfortable teleporting through the rollings when I had nothing to lose gave me the confidence that I had the mechanical skill to play through the rest of P3. It might not have been the correct play at the time to teleport through the rollings, but just being able to see that I went through it without having any issues gave me the confidence that if this situation comes up again later, I'm happy to just teleport through the rollings. For the first time on the account, with 31.5 minutes remaining on Black Mage, we managed to make it to the final shrink of P3. The end is in sight, and I just need to hold on to make it into Phase 4. At this point I felt that if I could make it into Phase 4, I have almost guaranteed the clear for the run. But it's not quite over just yet. At this point the difficulty for me would be trying to repot a lot of my buffs. I already had some difficulties in the past trying to repop my buffs mid-fight, and it did still prove to be a challenge in this phase. It was difficult trying to find safe times to press the buffs, but it had to be done to make sure I had enough damage for the rest of the fight. After one of my origin bursts towards the end of the phase, I started getting a little bit frustrated because Black Mage was too close to the center for my liking. The center can be quite dangerous because of the rising red orbs and the fact that the rollings can land on top of your head, so I was trying to drag him towards the right, and in my frustration I actually take a life because I wasn't fully focused. I get hit by a laser and lose half of my HP, and then I get dragged back into a falling, taking a HP death. I was very lucky there not to take both a HP and curse death because that falling is also a white curse. Not too long after, we have a pretty nasty pattern of falling, rolling and supers all at the same time. I wasn't really sure how to play this pattern and I tried to teleport through the falling at the top, but I end up actually catching it instead. Again, I got really lucky that I was just a HP death and not both HP and curse. This left me on 3 lives remaining, and as you can see, I'm starting to get really nervous. I only have 3 lives left and both my hero's wills are off cooldown. I have 3 minutes remaining until my origin burst and I have to hold on for that. The origin burst is what's going to get me out of this phase and I have to stay alive for it. It was very difficult knowing that I lost 2 lives basically in the span of a minute, and it definitely shook up my mental a little bit. At this point too, another disastrous thing happened that I didn't notice for the entirety of the rest of the run. I took that down FMA with my E-form, and it turned off my mana overload. For those who don't know, mana overload gives a significant amount of damage, at the cost of using mana. When I took the damage of the down FMA on my E-form, it took the entirety of my mana pool, which turned off my mana overload. This decreased my damage by a significant amount, and could be the reason why I make or break this run. At the end of the next burst that I was trying to do, I get hit with a pattern that required me to dodge the rolling. At the same time as this happening, there were a lot of super lasers, and I didn't know how to dodge it, and I take a HP death. I'm on 2 lives remaining, and the best I can do at this point is to hold on for about a minute and a half, waiting for my origin to come back. I took the time after respawning to also repop my guild skills, hoping that they'll get me out of this phase faster. This also ensures that I have the guild skills going into phase 4 and not having to worry about rebuffing in the middle of it. A little bit later, we get hit by the double pattern of rolling, falling, and on top of that we have an up FMA. I had both my Hero's Will on cooldown so I couldn't save myself, and because it's an up FMA I had to dodge upwards. By a sheer miracle I managed to only get hit by one thing out of all of that, taking only a white curse and then no lasers hitting me afterwards. That was by far probably the luckiest moment of the entire run, and there was a good chance, had I got unlucky, I could have lost 2 lives in one hit. After witnessing that and getting my heart rate really high, I realized that it was time for me to just try to set up my origin as fast as possible, get to safety, and get into P4. Once I entered into P4, I had to make a decision immediately. Am I going to be playing in white aura, or am I going to be playing in black aura? In a split second, I decided to play in black aura, which reduces my damage but allows me to use potions. Given the fact that I knew that some of my consumables were going to run out, this made it a pretty easy choice for me. I do lose out on a lot of damage because I am not playing with the black curse, but I think being able to be flexible and popping new consumables made it an easy choice. On top of that, it was my first time in P4 on this character, and I didn't really know how I could play P4 correctly with white aura. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, playing with a white aura allows me to do extra damage, but it stops me from using potions. During this phase, there are 2 things that we have to keep in mind. 1 is to stay alive, and 2 is we have to try to break that shield. Every 30 seconds, the boss will do a full map attack and regenerate a big shield on its HP bar. I need to be able to chip through that shield every time it comes up every 30 seconds, and if I don't, the boss's HP basically won't go down until my burst. Because I'm a DPM heavy class, it is very risky for me to rely on my burst to do majority of the damage. What this made me do is I had to play very aggressively on the boss while also trying my best to avoid as many mechanics as possible. It was at this point where me not having mana overload on made a really big difference, because it can make or break whether or not I can actually go through that shield. When it came to setting up my first burst, I felt very comfortable, and I realized that in P4 it was very simple to stay alive and set up my burst. What I didn't anticipate was actually what came afterwards. Because of the way that Battle Mage works, I have this purple background and there's nothing I can do about it. It will stay there until my burst runs out, and it really messes with the FMA. I can barely tell which ones are the black and white lightning. For those who don't know, if you are playing with the black background like I am, you have to be in the black column to be able to survive. Even though it was difficult to see, I just had to trust myself that I stood in the right column. With about 15 minutes remaining within the fight, it was time for my first origin burst in P4. This was a very important moment because this basically tells me whether or not I can actually clear the boss. The origin burst is by far the strongest amount of burst that I have of my character, and it is one of the best tools for clearing P4. And it doesn't do that much. During that burst, I did about 10% of the boss's HP. I have 15 minutes left to go, and with my strongest burst, I didn't get through very much of the HP bar, and I started getting really nervous here. That was the signal for me to play as aggressively as possible. I couldn't possibly stop attacking. I was playing quite safe throughout the beginning of phase 4, and I really didn't have enough time now to play safe anymore. This would have been a lot easier if I had mana overload, but like I said, I only had 2 lives on my first time in P4, and I just didn't notice that it was missing. As we got further into the fight with only 9 minutes remaining, I managed to stay alive and didn't lose a single life. It came to the time where I had to do my second origin burst, and this is where I had to make sure that I did everything correctly. I needed to make sure that all my buffs and all my bursts were ready. Unlike before, after my origin finishes, I decided to play really close up to the boss and constantly attack it. As long as my background is purple, I do not want to stop attacking Black Mage. This entire burst has to go through onto the HP bar. Thankfully, the FMA pattern was very nice to me, allowing me to continuously do damage, and it allowed me to just continuously keep my damage up. I broke through the next shield really quickly, and I made sure that every last drop of my buffs was going into the HP bar of Black Mage. It wasn't until the second FMA where Black Mage's HP bar stopped going down as fast, but this time though, we managed to get through 15% of the boss's HP. A massive improvement over the previous origin burst. With the boss at 39% remaining, with 8 minutes remaining, I realized that I had a quota that I had to reach before my next origin. If I couldn't get the boss down to at least 20% by the next origin, I could not clear the boss. I had to do half of the remaining HP in the next 6 minutes to even have a chance at clearing, and that is assuming that I also do a strong origin burst. When I realized that was the case, ironically I actually looked at my buff bar and I realized I was missing Echo. Unfortunately, I didn't notice the more important buff that was mana overload, but I did manage to rebuff my Echo, giving me an extra 3% attack. With my newfound quota, I decided to play very aggressively as often as possible to be able to chip into the HP bar. Every little bit of damage counted, trying to go for that 20% before my final burst. When it was time for my usual burst, I had to make sure that this did at least 10% damage. If I can do about 10% damage here, my off burst should be able to chip down 5%, putting me into the 20% quota that I needed. During that burst, I managed to do a good job at avoiding as many white balls as possible, because each of the white pellets would put a white curse on me, which would reduce my final damage by about 10%. This helped a lot in trying to reach that 10% damage requirement, and I did bring it down towards 25% by the end of my burst. During my next mini burst, I managed to get the boss down to a little bit under 20%. I was still in the running to be able to get this clear, and I needed to make sure that I did my origin burst correctly and that I had enough remaining time to get the clear. With only 4 minutes remaining, I probably didn't have enough time to do one final big burst, so I had to make sure the next origin counted. Holy fuck. Holy shit. I'm fucking dying. Oh my god. It's over.
It's over. Congrats.
Oh dude, I actually can't move my
I thought
hands.
you're gonna time out. I was so worried about your damage. You
Yeah,
made it.
the end was really
The
close.
origin was huge.
Yeah, the burst was so huge.
Dude, I was looking
I
at
was
it, I
scared
was
of
like,
the
what?
timeout, but the origin was crazy.
It was like, what, 30%? I pressed my origin, goes down to like 10. I was,
Yeah.
oh god. I cannot breathe, dude. Oh my
Watch him
god.
get a badge now.
Dude, if I get a badge, I'm gonna cry. Did I start my pre-quest? Yeah, honestly, I don't even care. If I forgot it, it is what it is. I don't remember if I started it. Oh my god, it's over. Oh god.
Holy shit! A solid 1 hour run.
1 fucking hour run. Oh my god. Oh shit. I need to actually breathe. Like legit, I don't think I was breathing for the last minute of the run.
Yeah, you can finally take a breath now.
Yeah, I can breathe again. Holy shit. Oh my god. What is the
I can't wait for the new bot.
Dude, my stomach actually hurts. I can't tell if it was my dinner or if I just didn't breathe.
Nah, take a break. Take a break, man.
I need to do the best part about this. Hang on. Oh my god, 2.5 bill. Oh my god, it's so much money.
Holy shit, that's huge.
Oh, 2.5 bill crystal. So any of you guys have a spot in your BM parties next month? I don't want to do that again.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure we do.
Has a spot.
No,
No,
you
can
can
Oh,
stop them.
you know, this is
Get
the
the
moment
weapon
of truth.
first.
I don't remember if I actually did the pre-quest for this. So there's a
Oh,
good
I said you
chance that I
finished it.
cleared and I don't have my Jenny weapon.
Oh no.
I think that looks right. This is the interface, right? If there's a cutscene that plays, that means I did it right. Alright, we did it. I
Yes.
did the
Oh,
pre-quest.
You're good.
I think. Unless, is there a cutscene for the first one? I hope there's no cutscene for the first one.
I can't remember.
I really didn't think the Black Mage run was going to be that long. Alright, did we get it? Did I get it? I got the box! It's done.
Oh, you're good.
It's good.
Time to do Von Leon pre-quest.
Yeah, you're actually not wrong. I don't think I have that boss unlocked. Like...
Oh, yeah, that happens to everyone.
Yeah, I'll leave that for part 44. And with that, guys, that's the end of this series. Thank you all so much for all the support that you've given me along the journey so far. I really considered stopping my solo progression journeys a lot earlier at various points, but I'm glad now that I stuck it through all the way to the end. I would like to take some time to thank a few people, all of my close friends who have been supporting me through the series, my guildies for always having my back, and of course all of you guys watching that made this series possible in the first place. I also wanted to do a shout out to every other solo progression content creator out there, in particular Kobe, who has been a major inspiration for me. You guys definitely lit the fire for me to make something like this, and I'm glad that I went all the way. I think that'll be it for now. It's time for me to take a short break, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh, look at that. A new burning.